if you are in England, I know people are talking about heat waves, and if you are in the United States of America, there's still the heat context. But right down here in the Caribbean, we're also having the heat. Even though this morning we had a shower, but it seems to create a little more intensity. The humidity is quite high today, and but it's the Caribbean. It's the Caribbean. So welcome again to Dr. Kenneth Niles, and this morning within this Caribbean sunshine, we are going to talk again about parenting, the Unskilled Experience Part 2. You know, you may have listened to the first one, and you would have heard the fact that yes, we became parents. Everybody's excited, you know, marriage or no marriage. People want to be aunties and grandparents and cousins, etc. They want to develop relations, and therefore here we are saying, hey, babies. But nobody really understands the fact that we have to be taught how to be parents. And we find ourselves becoming mommies and daddies, and we hear the word father, we hear the word mother, papa, dada, etc. And yet it's like, wow, what do I do and how do I do? And so there's that continuum of exacerbation and anxiety in wondering what's the best. And everybody would have gotten some of what they are and who they are from their own socialized behaviors and experiences with parents and their own relatives. And so therefore, we come with that knowledge, not having it tested. There's no research that continues to test what true parenting is. We have accepted. We have the issues of discipline, and we have the issues of nurturing, and the host. And one of the issues that we don't look at is the issue of generational planning. How do we look at that for the future? But nevertheless, the child comes and we're growing. And last week, if you would have listened, you will see we talked generally in a broad spectrum of appreciating this unskilled dynamic and learning to be much more sensitive to the fact that we do not know. Yet we want to have the best. Yet we want to have that child who is going to be on top. But nobody ever trained us. So that we pull from A, B, C, D, right through the alphabet, 26 different ways maybe, from 26 different perspectives and behaviors and experiences. And we come and say, hey, come, let's make us your child, let's make us good parents, and let's help us to be the best we ever had and will ever be. And so we go along with the I told you so, listen to me, I'm your father, I'm your mother. But alas, it's still a trial and error issue, because we cannot fortify that what we are creating in terms of a child or adult to be, that is from today, that we have to sit back and we have to readily come into those terms of saying, yes, I need help. I need to go forward. And these sessions are here not just to help, but to create awareness and to bring you into perspective what can be best and what can be even better than best. And so therefore, it's an ongoing conversation. We may not be able to address all the issues of parenting, but we are able to at least give you the motivation or the stimulation to think about why are you a parent, how are you a parent, what's going to happen. I promised today that we will look at that issue of attachment. Also a bit of the issue of breastfeeding. Now, I'm not going to be looking at breastfeeding from the medical perspective, even though you can read that and hear that as parents when you go to the hospital or your doctors and tell you about all the nutritional values, the enzymes, the hormones, and the antibodies, etc. But I want to look at it from a more social and psychological perspective, where we see that need for breastfeeding that creates this issue of attachment. One of the things that is important for us to realize is that attachment deals with basically three areas. We look at relationships, we look at siblings, and we look at caregiving. And you will want to know why those three, because the issue of relationships, which is broad, I can't just say parents, because when you think about adult relationships, we are dealing with parents, we are dealing with grandparents, we deal with aunts and uncles, and by extension, teachers, who also will come into the factor of caregiving. We look at siblings, who will want to say, sit, rise, move, you're not hearing me, I'm your big sister, I'm your big brother. And then of course caregiving, which some of us have had to experience because of our parents' financial and social activities, so that we will have to have somebody come in, and some of us were taken to the nursery. So we grew up with another person who became our caregiver, and understood what we could do, what we couldn't, and maybe didn't understand. But again, what's happening there, as we'll see, we are exposing our children to several dynamics of personalities and disciplines in terms of how to. So that when we are ourselves relational in terms of me being a parent, there is somebody going to be called a grandparent who's going to think, or she or he will have a say, as against to mother, to daddy and mommy. So you have mommy and daddy on one side, who sees themselves as the first contact, and they're the first authority. And then there's the extended authorities of the grandparents and the elder aunts and uncles, etc. So we have to realize that when we are interpreting what is to be, what is it to be, how do I work the is to be? So let's say whether it's emotional, whether it's about crying or not crying, we have again a whole issue of gender as to how I should cry and who should cry, whether females should cry and males shouldn't cry. So we have that, and then you go from one parental context to the extended, and we see that they say cry, so that the child could have diversities of explanations and diversities of operations in terms of their personality, because we are basically looking at personality. We are basically looking at behavior and cognition, how you think and how you behave. So that one factor, let's say first authority, parent, would say, hey, you're smart, but by the time you go across to extended, maybe aunts and uncles or even grandparents, what silliness is this? Who taught you that? So therefore, we have to realize that that child now is going to be confused a little bit here, or much, with these two dynamics, these two frames of what thought life is supposed to be. We come back to that. Hold on. Siblings. So I am left basically with a sibling because I am not number one. Number one child has no sibling to take care of him or her. But as number one child, he or she will be able to take care of number 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. So we find that number one child is going to be come into a space of authority and given instruction as if a parent, because parents are now moving away. And of course, we can use that C word again, caregiver. So you realize that relations are also caregivers. We realize that siblings can be caregivers. And then, of course, you have nursery attendants, etc. And, of course, educational institutions, their teachers will also become caregivers. And we could have a debate on that too, if teachers want to be considered as caregivers. That's what you are. You have the child for most of the child's life. Between 7 and 3, you are there. When they go home, there are no parents. So we have to be real about being a caregiver as a teacher. So let's see what else we can learn. We have to realize that we are looking at the whole issue of child security. And that's basically one of the basic tenets of parenting. The first one, the other one, of course, is nurturing, which we will deal with eventually today, I trust. But we're looking at security. How do we work security? How do we not work security? Now, why security is important, and I'm using that word very broadly. The first thing about us is that we want the child to be safe. But that safe has to do with being normal. In the womb, during the gestation period, both parties, mother-to-be, father-to-be, or mother-father, they are very careful as to ensure that safety by ensuring mommy goes to the doctor, gets the checkups, gets the testings, gets the x-rays, etc. Make sure there's calmness, the environment is right. You don't want to excite the fetus, etc. So that there's all that time making sure that that fetus is secured. In a car, if you're driving, if you have to travel by airplane, if you have to travel long distances, it's all about the safety of the child. So that there is this mindset in terms of the child's growth, even from the womb, or security. When the child is born, you want again to interpret that word. Is the child alive? Is the child in the right space? Did the child come out the right way? So whether the child comes out, whether the child came out naturally, or by cesarean, or by forceps, what's going to happen? Was there enough oxygen, brain issues, safety, all about that system, safety and security. And then we put the child in an incubator or no incubator, and the child you want to make sure the child cries, all about life and whether the child is in that secured position. Mind you, that's where our brain is. So that it's important for us to notice, again, in those areas, how skilled are we? Have we ever sat down pre-birth and discussed those things? If my child doesn't cry when it's slapped on the bottom, if the child, the immediacy of delivery, if there are problems. What about shock and trauma during pregnancy? Have we ever sat down? What about a fall during pregnancy? What about abandonment? What about displacement? Some pregnant women may be abused. What about that? Have we ever discussed those things? And all those things are very, very important to interpreting the life of the child. Now, we may not do that, but those things are important. And I want you, if you are pregnant and if you are going to be, it is time for us to sit with a counselor or with an adult. And it doesn't have to be about right or wrong. It has to be about a discussion that brings an awareness of who you are and who you're going to be. And I want us to use that word to awareness. It brings you into that place of being more aware of what you need to be skilled in terms of even behavior as a parent. So when we have that kind of lack, there's going to be the anxieties that we're going to experience even in the birthing of the child. When the child is born, it's a sign, wow, the child is born. Woo, shake. Yeah, we count the fingers, we count the toes. Checks, balances, fine, eyes, everything, head, size of head, everything is into the scale of normalcy. Oops, no, I think one arm is too short, one arm is longer than 1 foot. Those things are real. And how do we work that then without creating that anxiety, which will then affect the parent? Or you could be so excited that you kind of forget that the child has needs. And mommy and daddy are being congratulated, and everybody's there excited. Oh, a baby has come. Is it a boy? Is it a girl? But the boy or girl needs some attention. And so that in those first days of the child has come out of a dark environment and come into one where there's more than me. I was one in this womb. Or even though I was a twin, there were two, but there's more than two. There's a mommy, there's a daddy, there's an auntie, there's a grand, they have several voices. Child. So what we have to do now is to look. The mother is encouraged to breastfeed or to feed. But as the child draws on the breast and pulls, it's not just about milk. It's not just about antibodies. It's about attachment. It's about coming into that space where we are connected one with the other. And that pulling, sucking activity is like a drawing card into each other. So child into parent. And so that it creates that affinity it creates that bond, that holding on, as it were, that gives you that sense of security. Oh, you would like to know what happened to the other partner, the most important one called Papa, Daddy? Yes, Daddy. How does Daddy get there? He doesn't have outward breasts, but he has a chest. He has hands. So it is important for Daddy also to bring that child into himself and to keep that child close to his heart. Let that child hear the rhythm. The rhythm. Because it's also the same thing like hearing. As a child is lifted across either side, the child would not just have the pulling of the breast, but the rhythm of the heart. And so with Daddy's heart, there's going to be a rhythm. And mind you, that child is going to know the difference between the two hearts. Hearts beat. And so there's going to be that coming together again. Now, this is important as the child grows with that sense of security. But I want us to realize that we got to keep going on. It's not just about breastfeeding. No, it's not just about looking at how that child is attaching as a baby. No, it's how we continue in the first year. By the end of the year, are we still maybe breastfeeding, or are we still hugging? And one of the things I want to help us with, and it's something that I wish we still could do as adults, but again, we stopped doing that as adults, is hugging and kissing. That child needs as much hugs as it had in the first month of its life as it would be in the next year and several years to come of its life. It's important for you to maintain an identity of attachment as we go along. We have to learn how to keep hugging, how to keep passing your hand in that hair. Fathers, passing that hand in that hair. How to keep holding the hand as the child walks. How to hug. Put the child on your lap. Did I say that? Yes. You see, and what has happened also, let me put an inference here. What has happened also, there is so much negativities and there's so much ills and offenses and misdemeanors that have occurred out of parent-child relationships that now there's so many rules and eyebrows going up and red flags when you say things like put the child on a father's lap. So we have to work against all these anomalies and recognize that there is a naturalness in terms of how I work my own attachment. So the first thing here, as I want to reiterate, is that issue of security. Because we want to help the child to find that there is going to be a need for autonomy. That means a need for how I can make decisions and how I can work that. So, because Daddy and Mommy wants that. They are the boss. But we have to realize that the child also has thought patterns. The child can think. So therefore, the child needs to be encouraged as often and as early as a baby in the first couple of months to learn to allow that child how to use the mind. But we have heard somewhere as parents that we have to hover. Don't do this. Be careful. Hold on. Don't leave it alone. Don't touch. Be careful. Don't drop it. Don't roll. Excuse me. The child is thinking. What we have to learn is to be at hand to observe movement. Is the child rolling? Allow the child to roll. Just stand there. Don't have to stop the child from rolling. Is the child kicking and cooing? Yes. Let the child kick and coo. Is the child trying to pull something? Let the child try to pull. Is the child creeping somewhere that you think is dangerous? Look at what really is the danger. It may not be. Is the child playing inside? Oh, praise the Lord, the child must play inside. Is the child pulling down something? Yes, the child must pull down something. The child's a mind. Don't let the child feel that everything the child is doing is wrong and only what you say is right. Because the child would have a problem now of drawing back, and you wouldn't even realize it as early as 1 year, as early as 2, and that's why we have that word coming in, very early by 1.5, no. Because we have been so insistent in removing the child from that natural thought process. Now, how do we balance that? We balance that by being present to give guidance, and we bless. We reward by commendations. That was a good thing you did. Clap. Daddy loves what you did. You're doing very well. And so you begin to say these things. The child don't have to understand that. The child is hearing, and the child is experiencing your demeanor, that pleasantry, that smile, those accolades that are coming. The child is identifying with that as safety. The child is safe in that environment. Because otherwise the child could feel threatened when there is a shouting, when there's a stern ball, when there's that finger that keeps pointing as if you're wrong. Not the finger that keeps pointing to educate, but the finger that keeps pointing to wrong. So we have to look at how we are working that. And so it's important also to be responsive. That's what we talk about. Be responsive, not reactive. And so I want us to learn these skills, how to be, and I call them skills, how to be responsive, how to be participative, how to be hearing and listening to the child from birth till. And as the child grows, by the time the child gets 5, there is a much more secured, autonomous, responsive, and of course, the last word is adaptable. The child is able to be more adaptable rather to be more stereotyped. And we want an adaptable child. We want a child that is able to mix and play and to be involved with and to change from scenario to scenario, from experience to experience without being traumatized. And so therefore, somewhere along the line, by the time the child gets into teenage life, then you realize that children by then are being traumatized very quickly by certain experiences, which ought not to have been, especially when they were growing up in your, very nice cocoon, very protected. You see, notice I did not use that word before. I'm using the word security and safe. But what we do is to protect. We want to hover. No, the child doesn't need your protection. The child needs your safety. The child also needs his or her safety. And so let's continue this conversation again. This seems to be an ongoing thing. I thought we would have got into a bit of the nitty, but we have to stop here a little bit here. I don't want to exhaust your communicating and engaging process, but it is important for you to see the principle, the basic principle of attachment. But when the researcher, Bowley, recognizes in terms of his research, he realized that children where their parents were very controlling and very protective didn't have the kind of responses 3 years later or 5 years later. And it was an ongoing exercise, the research, to come to this place of appreciating that from the birthing day, attachment is real. As we go on, we realize how important it is. So tell me, what have you learned today? What have you really spoken of today? One of the things is we realize that attachment is important from the time the child is birthed, but we have to also realize that pre-birth, those gestation days are also part of your whole concept of what? Safety and protection. So in terms of birthing, we have relationships, we have siblings, we have caregivers. Those 3 dynamics are there waiting for the child. But we all have to realize that it's about safety and protection, and safety and security, not about protecting. The child is already protected because the child is alive. The child has breath, but you have to make sure that you maintain that safety without hovering and without controlling and without making the child feel that their thought patterns and their behavior is always wrong. Let's realize that you have a thinking child. Let's realize that you have a growing child. Let's realize that you have a child who is growing through the experiences to interrelate, to communicate, and to find itself into that place of being autonomous, being adaptable, being communicative, and being relational. So, until next time, Dr. Niles says, enjoy parenting.